Hi guys, it's me, and today I'm going to be showing you how you could approach a summary based on the guideline that I gave you. You've been working on Truman Capote's short story Miriam, and I know that some of you have turned in their summaries and outlines. And you may have chosen a different approach, and I'm not saying that this one that I am going to show you today is the only one possible approach. No, there are different methods, different approaches. They may work fine, but this is the one that works best for me. And therefore, I want to show you how I approach such an assignment. So let's get started. Um, you remember I gave you this guideline here, writing a summary. There should be an introduction, including information on the author, the title, type of text, and if mentioned, place and time of publication. And then you work your way, or I suggest you work your way through the following guiding questions. Who is, are the central characters? Where does the action take place? When does the action take place? What is happening and why is happening? What is happening? And at last, what is the theme, the conflict about? What is the central idea? Okay, so when I am using this guideline, of course, I go back to the story and collect information that go together with each of these questions. Okay, so I will watch out for information in terms of, okay, doesn't work, in terms of who, where, when, what, why. Okay, and now we start. So here we are with the question, with the text. Truman Capote, his short story is called Miriam. We don't know when it was written, but here it says it's a short story, so we know what type of text. And it won the Henry Memorial Award in 1943. So it was probably written either at the end of the 1930s or at the beginning of the 1940s. Okay, so this is just a rough date, but we don't know, at least not from this introduction, when exactly the story was written. All right. So, Truman Capote Miriam. Now, who? We know that Mrs. H.T. Miller, and she later tells her that her first name is Miriam also, is a widow. And therefore, she had lived alone in a pleasant apartment. It also says that she had lived in a pleasant apartment in a remodeled brownstone near the East River. So we may assume that she is probably either living in Brooklyn or more likely on Manhattan Island. Okay? We also know she had no friends, and the other people in the house never seemed to notice her. And on her last birthday, she was 61. So, there is a teensy bit of information that we may collect here. And we go here, author, oops. So here we are, author Truman Capote. Title is Miriam. Type of text, a short story. Okay, so here we can also highlight this. Say, short story. Place and time of publication. Probably at the end of the 1930s. Oops. 1930s or early 1940s. 40s. Okay, so the central characters. Who are the central characters? We know. So the first central character is Mrs. H.T. Her real name is Miriam. Her first name is Miriam Miller. She's a widow. And she's 61 years old. So this is what we know, and we also know there is a young Miriam. Miriam probably 10 or 11 years old. Okay, so and we also know something. Moves from one elderly person to another. The assumption is she may not have a family in the true sense of what families are meant to be, right? Like having a mother or a father or whatever. She seems to live with people as a replacement and substitute for the family that she probably doesn't have. Okay, so this is what we know. Where does the action take place? We also know this one by now. The action takes place in New York City. Probably Manhattan or Brooklyn. So this is what we know. We don't know very much, but this is what Truman Capote tells us here. So when does the action take place? When does the action take place? The action takes place in February over a period of roughly 10 days. So, all right. And what is happening? Mrs. Miller meets Miriam one evening. In the course of 3 meetings, she loses control of her life. Miriam takes control of Mrs. Miller's life and moves in with her. So this is basically what is happening, right? So here we can say that this is the action. What is the theme? Conflict about. What is the central idea? This is a question that we may want to leave for later, okay? But this is basically the plot structure. What makes me collect all these points? Well, let's go back to the story and follow up. So we have found out she has no friends. The other people in the house never seem to notice her. She was 61. Okay, so let's move on. Then she met Miriam. It was snowing that night. So this is the first encounter, probably a Friday night. I don't know, but it could be possible that this scene is set on a Friday night when Mrs. Miller decides to go to the movies. Okay, let's move on. There isn't much here, but in terms of when does the action take place? 2 pages later, we get the information it snowed all week. So after they've been to the movies together, it snowed all week. And here we get another indication of the timeline. We are at the weekend on Sunday. She went to the grocery, closed, of course. And then that evening. So the next scene is set on this Sunday evening when Miriam shows up at Mrs. House for the second time. We even know what time, but that is not really important, and I don't think we should include this in the summary. It is, wait a second, I found it somewhere. I think it was something like after 11, a little after 11. She looked at the clock a little after 11. It didn't seem possible. She was always asleep by 10. So, okay, the little girl shows up quite late in the evening. It's nearly, not quite, but nearly midnight. All right. Here we get another piece of information as to the time when the story is set. And this is in February, right? She dropped her coat and beret. She was indeed wearing a silk dress, white silk in February. Okay, so we take this down in our draft because now we know when exactly the story is set and when exactly the action is taking place. Okay, so we have the starting point roughly around a weekend, then it snowed all week. Then Mrs. Miller loses track of time and tries to do her grocery shopping on a Sunday when the stores are all closed, and that same evening, Miss Miriam rings her doorbell. Okay, so let's move on. How old is she? 10, 11? This is a guess. This is not information given by the narrator. This is a guess. It is a guess, and it is Mrs. Miller's guess. So this is our only point of orientation when we try to make out how old may this little girl be. But we know approximately she is not 5 or 6 or so. She's not yet an adolescent. She's somewhere in between, 10, 11. Okay, so let's move on. All of a sudden, Mrs. Miller begins to realize that she is alone. This is something that was mentioned at the beginning of the story, but here it is confirmed. Yeah, it's not only the narrator who tells us that, but she becomes aware of the fact that she is alone. She has no one to turn to, right? That's exactly what the story tells us here. It came to Mrs. Miller that there was no one to whom she might turn for help, of course. She was alone. a fact. Okay, uh, never mind. So let's go on. Then she has this nervous breakdown and wakes up this Tuesday morning and feels better. Okay, so now we have the timeline again. First visit of the movie theater was probably maybe on a Friday, maybe on a Saturday night. Then it snowed all week. On Sunday, she had the last meeting with Miriam, or the second meeting with Miriam. And now, after a day of nervous breakdown, when she stays in bed, here is another indication in terms of time, Tuesday morning. Okay, and she goes shopping, and then we move on again here at precisely 5. So we're still on Tuesday, and here at precisely 5, the doorbell rang, and Mrs. Miller knew who it was. So a third meeting is here announced. What we know is, and now we get a teensy bit of information about young Miriam's life. Because here she says, the last place I lived was with an old man. He was terribly poor and we never had good things to eat, but I think I'll be happy here. And later, here, wait a second. This is also a piece of information. We should highlight this because this is important to know. I've come to live with you, said Miriam. You remember? Mrs. Miller had asked her questions about her family background and spoken of her mother and wondered why her mother would let a young girl like Miriam run around the city in the middle of the night and in types of clothes. But now we know apparently she doesn't seem to have a family, and therefore she is moving from place to place with a large box in which she has all the things that belong to her. All her possessions and belongings seem to be in that box, mostly clothes. And now she has come to Mrs. Miller in order to live with her. So this is the information that the story gives us and that we may include in the summary. Let's go through this again. So we have Truman Capote, Miriam, newspaper article, the short story, the type of story. Then we may take a wild guess in terms of when was the story written, probably sometime in the 1930s or sometime in the early 1940s. The central characters are Mrs. Miller, a widow, 61 years old. Can you explain to me why I did what I did? You probably can't, because I can't even explain it to you either. Sometimes things just happen because this old timer sometimes doing things that you shouldn't be doing. All right, so here, the two central characters, Mrs. H.T., this is the name of her husband, Um, and her own first name is also Miriam, Mrs. Miller and Miriam. She, we know for sure, because the narrator said so, Mrs. Miller is 61 years old, and Miriam, this is just an assumption on Mrs. Miller's part, she is probably 10, 11 or so. And what we also collected from the story is she moves from one elderly person to another. Where does the story take place? We know it's New York City, probably Manhattan or Brooklyn. The information we get is there is this East River. So, should be either on the western side of the East River, which would be Manhattan, or it would be Brooklyn on the east side. When does the action take place? It is sometime in February over a period of roughly 10 days. And what is happening? Okay, 3 meetings here. The first, the movie theater. The second, this ridiculously late time, 11 o'clock. And then the last time, or the third time, when Miriam comes to move in with Mrs. Miller. All right? So, and why is happening what is happening? Well, shall we leave this for later, maybe for a third category of assignment, either an analysis or a comment or a discussion or so. I don't think we should go into any speculation here. So we will not focus on this one. All right? I think we should leave this question open, and also this one. I think we concentrate and focus on these things. Okay, so this is what you could use to write your summaries. No more than that. All right? Okay, guys. Thanks for being here. And I'll catch you in one of the next videos. Bye-bye.